Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm hoping you're enjoying the event. I do feel like it's a disproportionately high group of extroverts, maybe, that attend these types of conferences. And this panel is no exception. We have a very outgoing group, but we all have a little bit of a unique approach to networking that's more diverse than I would have even expected. My background, if you had to ask me what I do, I work with companies in specific stages going from small to big. I live in Milwaukee, but I haven't worked in Milwaukee in probably 15 to 20 years. I work with startups across the country, usually in a period for 3 years, when they're going through a chaotic stage. I love chaos. That's fun for me. And that's kind of when I step in and work with different organizations. Interesting enough, our panel also comes from really different backgrounds. We have Allie, whose perspective on networking, I heard very funny stories and interesting, expansive stories on how she was creating networking both personally and professionally as someone who moved to Milwaukee and was trying to establish a network from scratch. So we're going to let them both introduce themselves as well. And then Jamie, who took a leap from the corporate world into being an entrepreneur and how building a network almost from the start of one in the fabric of our community is pretty unique. So I'm going to let them talk a little bit and give their intro, which is one of the first tips of networking is having some way to be able to describe like what your background is and what you do. And then we'll jump into some specific questions.
Yeah. Oh, I can go first. So my name's Alexandra. Most people call me Allie unless you met me in the first 5 years of my career, and then I was Alex. It's a long story. I'm an attorney, so I work at Antonopoulos Leonhard, which is quite a mouthful because of the group we have in the back of the room. We now go by ALG. It's a little easier to swallow. I do commercial real estate and business law, and it was kind of an interesting experience when I was asked to be on the panel to talk about networking because you wouldn't, although business development is in any business, an attorney is not usually the first person you think of, but as it was mentioned, I started my career very uniquely when I got to do a lot of business development because the partner in my firm wanted nothing to do with it. So I was 23 years old, not knowing what I was selling, going to coffee. So it was great, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that some more.
Yes. Okay, I'm still on. First, I just want to soak you all in. Thank you so much for showing up, for yourself, for the others in this room, for us on the panel, for me. I'm really honored. So thank you. My name is Jamie, and I am a super proud Milwaukee small business owner. I founded my company, Nourish Natural Products, in 2018 after I was laid off from an almost 20-year career in corporate America. And so I founded Nourish, and we are a manufacturing company. And our product categories include personal care products, beauty products, wellness products, and products for the home. And what I'm really proud of is that everything that we make is 100% clean and natural. So we sell our products on our website, nourishnaturalproducts.com. We sell at boutique retailers across the country, and then I still participate in a lot of events here in Milwaukee and other places. And I think even more important to me was to be able to use the Nourish platform to have a larger voice to speak out, or a louder voice to speak out on what really matters to me. And that's pouring into women and reminding you matter.
So, thank you. It's a beautiful room. So I think there's some really interesting stories on how you both almost pivoted organically into building your networks. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit, your start was unique, and then Allie, if you can talk how you became an event guru.
Event planner.
At some point. But there's an interesting way. I think we all have networks when we look at our communities today, the people we work with, our coworkers, our past coworkers. So the network is there, and then the question of how that network gives back to you and you give back to it is something we'll talk a little bit more about.
Mm-hmm. So I feel that I really had a beautiful blessing in disguise when I was laid off, because I was in a Christian job with great benefits and a great pay. I didn't know that I would have taken the leap if they hadn't showed me the door. But I didn't take it as personal. My entire department was laid off, and severance package. And I had decided that whatever came next on my journey needed to be filled with passion and purpose. And so I have a long story that I could share with you, but what I really want to just impart with you now is my formula for success. So I hope you have your pens and paper ready. Show up. That's it. Show up, and I'll add show up with a smile. And I'm literally sitting here today because I showed up, I smiled on my yoga mat. So after I was laid off, a friend invited me to her tiny yoga studio on the second floor of a building in Whitefish Bay. And I instantly fell in love with the community and the practice and started showing up every day. And when I show up, I bring all my energy with me. And if it's a really quiet type of situation like a yoga studio, then I translate my energy through my smile. And so as we were flowing through the yoga poses, I would look at the yoga instructor and I would just with my smile say, "You're awesome. This is awesome. Great job," right? And because of that, the instructors, we quickly became friends. And so I would stay after class and chat with the instructors. And so would many other yoga students, so a lot of introductions were made. And I met absolutely wonderful people in that yoga studio. I met my mindful self-compassion teacher who, no big deal, totally changed my life. And with that too, so much of what I learned from her is what I share on the Nourish platform of how to be kinder to ourselves. I also met boutique owners who went on to carry my company's products. I met new friends who turned into customers and cheerleaders and brand advocates. I also met several community leaders, including Kate Mayer. So Kate and her husband Dan, they own this publication you might have heard of called Milwaukee BizTimes. So Kate and I, after class one day, exchanged phone numbers and decided to meet for tea. And it's been years, and Kate continues to pour into me, and I think I do okay for her too. But it really has been that. It's been showing up, it's been smiling, and I'll also add that I say yes to so many opportunities, and especially in the beginning, I really said yes to everything. Okay, so I see Elizabeth, who has been a champion of mine in Nourish, Business Accelerator programs. I did pitch competitions. I did every event I could attend. I did farmers markets, makers markets. I joined every networking group. I joined the mastermind groups. I got involved in social impact and community impact. And the reason I did all of this is because, one, I needed to learn. I had never been an entrepreneur. I don't know that I ever wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? And I needed to learn from my community. It was also really fulfilling to me, and I think really importantly as well, is that people do business with those who they know, they like, and they trust. I want to do business with people who I know, I like, and I trust. And so that's why I invest an incredible amount of time and energy into showing up. With that said, I also want you to know that I take really good care of myself. And so I practice self-kindness, self-compassion every single day. And so I listen to where I'm at. So I'm just saying show up and show up for yourself.
So my role into networking was a little bit different. As I mentioned, I was 2016, I graduated Breakout Law School. I was about 23 years old and a professional for the first time with zero business experience. So I talked to my parents a lot. I would say my dad is probably my number one mentor and champion. And he really taught me to lean into things I'm good at and energizing people, connecting people, and planning events. I'm like the Cuban Martha Stewart and me and my mother. So I figured out that with no budget for networking and no, business card I could charge things to, if I planned it, they would come. And if they came and found value, they would come back. So I started going to golf outings all the time, as most lawyers do. And I realized I was really bad at it, but I'm okay at being bad at things. I think that's kind of a unique thing I have, is I'm okay at leaning into stuff I'm bad at. I'm just very honest with you about it. So I realized a lot of women didn't golf because they weren't good, they didn't find the time, it was too expensive, it took too long, and it was just kind of a list of reasons as to why they wouldn't do something. So I was talking to some friends and I decided I would change that. So I planned a 9-hole golf scramble. It cost $40, starting at 2 o'clock. No golf experience or golf clubs required. And I started doing that. It turned into a very popular event. And then So that's kind of how my networking started and how I've grown my career over the years.
I think it's interesting as someone who doesn't typically work in Milwaukee but live in Milwaukee, my networking is a little bit non-traditional. It tends to lend itself to peer groups, interest groups. I love technology. I don't work in technology, but somehow it's always around me. So I'm in a few technology networking groups. What's interesting is I think depending on what you like and look for, some advice would be, you heard it earlier, peer networking is close to where you live today. You know, people that have same industry or same levels of jobs, your coworkers, is a great place to start. It tends to be an easy step out, right? Community interest groups that fit within your passion points. What's wild about Milwaukee and compared to some of the other places that I went is our networking and networking groups tend to be a little quieter. In some of the cities I've worked in, Boulder, Austin, the fabric for infrastructure is very loud. Like if you want to find a women's tech group, if you want to start your own business, there's very loud groups that are available. What I find is most of those groups are here, they're just a little bit quieter. So I would say a note to self on some of the community, there's an incredible amount of community groups here that do amazing work and help network. It's just not easy to find, and I find that unique to the Midwest. It's interesting, I'm working in Chicago, I'm in a building with 50 startups. It's still quieter than some of these other cities I've worked in where the voices and the help is a little more accessible. So you might have to work a little harder here, but it's certainly worth it. There's incredible organizations to help you. One of the things you heard earlier was the idea of one-on-one and personal relationships and starting to network that way. And I think it's incredibly valuable when you get the chance to approach someone and ask for advice. I coach a few CEOs here, and literally they came out and asked, for, hey, would you have a coffee? Maybe you guys could share some examples of networking you've done one-on-one or where you're actually asking for the support and what the response has been.
My best tip, so I try to learn from everyone, and so then when I am going through a situation and I need help, I think through who is really awesome at that, and then I reach out to that person, and I'm fortunate that people say yes, and I come prepared, right? I look into what is this person all about, what do they like, what are they on LinkedIn, what are they on the different socials, what are the articles written about them. I come prepared, I have my list of questions, and I'm really clear about what I want. Right? Because I don't want to put the onus on that person to try to figure out what they need to tell me during that meeting, so I am really prepared. And then at the end too, I like to write a handwritten note thanking that person, and then have a gift. Right, so I pick a Nourish product and I leave with a gift. And it could easily just be the card, but I think that most people don't take time to do that, so that sets you out as someone memorable. And again, people want to do business with those they know, like, and trust.
So I have kind of a two-part answer to this. One, I have never said no to a lunch or coffee. I'm at my current position now because I got a call out of the blue on a Thursday and took a lunch on a Friday, right? So I think whether it's a student that's in law school trying to figure out how to cold call a law firm, or it's a new person in commercial real estate that just wants to get to know me and what a lawyer actually does and how I help them, or just someone in the area that's like, hey, you're young, you're a girl, will you meet my daughter, will you meet whatever. I've never said no to a lunch, and it's always done me good. And I would also say, and this is kind of a dovetail off what you said, I go to lunch with people that I know and I trust and I want to ask for advice. I almost never use the word mentor though. We talked about this on our call. A lot of people think the word mentor comes with a lot of responsibility, and they have to call you, and they have to check in on you, and they have to be available for you, and they have to be the all-wise one. So there's an attorney I can think of right now who has 50 years of experience. I consider her a mentor. I would never tell her that to her face. But when I have a question or I need to know something, she's who I call. And so I think figuring out kind of those relationships and taking those coffees, and whether they're your age or not your age, I mean, I'll never forget, I invited this attorney who's in her 60s to my birthday party, and I was at a conference with her legal associate, and he's like, she's going to your birthday party? And I was like, yeah, I love her, why not? She likes to paint, it's a painting birthday party. Like, just including people and giving them the opportunity to decide if they want to participate. I think is also a big way to build relationships, both professionally that end up helping you personally and vice versa.
And I think in a lot of networking instances, especially one-on-one meetings, people's time is precious. So can they make time, being clear in what you're asking for, what type of networking you're doing, maybe you're in a career change, maybe you're starting a business, whatever that is, I think being clear on that. And then the gratitude aspect, I think is something, especially as you move and evolve your career, I find that as much time that I give is the time I get back when I need it from my network. And so I always save a portion of time for giving because I know it will come back in some way from a connection or some other sort of ancillary place. So it's interesting how that comes together.
I think when you're super clear about what you want, that the person you're asking can assess if they're the right person or not. And if they're not, most of the times people have connected me with people who are.
Absolutely.
And then you almost have that introduction that is a thumbs up from that person. So.
How do you typically tap into your network when needed? I think this is something a lot of people have connections. They might be informal. You're not really sure how to keep them informed or stay in contact.
Yeah, so I can start. I do it pretty much two ways. I would call it electronically, so text messages, emails, LinkedIn posts. If I see a business journal or BizTimes article about them, I'll usually send them and be like, hey, congrats, this is great. Just kind of highlighting that, even if it's a simple touch, takes a couple minutes of my time. I also say that I reach out to my core network, which is kind of in rings, right? There's the people that you know well, and there's the people that you know, and then there's the faces you recognize, and so on and so forth. Sometimes I just go get coffee, or I go get my nails done, right? And then other times it's, hey, I have a question. And then just making sure you're always available to be that resource for them. We're talking about, the industry. I think it's, when you love what you do, you're not really working. And so I love talking about shop, or what deals are going on, or are banks loaning money, or interest rates, or I'm learning about finance in a way I never have before. Just because my friends know a lot more than I do, and I have a lot to share with them. So just being that resource, and whether it's asking them for something specifically or just spending time with them, those relationships build over time. And I have 2 industry friends that are staying up at my wedding. So, it grows. And I think just being available, whether it's electronically or personally, or for a purpose or for no purpose at all, can go a long way.
Yes, absolutely. And I would also add to that, I make sure that I'm authentically visible all the time, and that's either in the community and at events or socially. And so I've invited my friends, my followers along on my journey from the very beginning. And so I invited when I hit the pitfalls and the learning opportunities, and I've also been able to share highlights as well. And I also ask my community a lot for their feedback. So if we're coming up with a new product and a new label design, which do you like better, right? If we're coming up with a new lip balm flavor, would you try this lip balm, would you not, right? So I'm always asking for feedback so people feel a bit of ownership in Nourish, and that their voice is heard and does matter. And so when there are times then that I really need something bigger from my community, I am very clear on what I need, why I need it, and I've been really fortunate that people rise to the occasion and they help me out.
One of the things I hope you guys took away this morning, there was some incredible advice from the initial few speakers regarding internal networking. If you're at a larger organization, how do you network and build relationships internally? And I would say I thought some of the topics that came up there were topics that came up when we did our session, building your peer groups, asking for sponsors or mentors, tapping into existing educational opportunities. I think there's a lot of interesting advice there. When you're in a smaller organization, your distance to the outside is close. You have to network. You're in a smaller organization, you're constantly working externally. When you're in a large organization, you're in a function that works with a collaborative group, then maybe you move out to multifunctional. And so your networking starts here and really has to thread through more. Maybe give some advice on how you think someone in a larger organization might be able to build better relationships and networks from any point of a function in a larger group.
Sure. So have you heard of the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie? Yes, so that has been such an influential book for me, and what I learned in that book is that people really like to talk about themselves, and so I taught myself how to be a really great listener. I taught myself interesting questions to ask people. So I would ask people and then I listen. That goes back to, people will walk away from a conversation even if you haven't said very much, but if you listen to them, wow, I had a great conversation with Jamie. Right? And so the other author that I really loved, Brene Brown, she shared the following. I wrote this down. I'd love to share it with you. I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. So I think if you lead, if you carry yourself in that kind of way, it's going to pay dividends no matter how big or small the organization is.
So I've never candidly been in a big organization, so it's a little bit of a different thing for me, but I think kind of what Jamie mentioned earlier about being authentic, when I started in the new job, I brought everyone a piece of my culture. It was like, hi, this is me, this is what I am, this is where I'm from. I would go to my coworkers, I just did this at my new job, and I was like, so you practice law. What kind of cases do you want versus what kind of cases do you currently have? Like when I'm out there networking and I get someone that wants to do business, is it worth bringing to you? Do I tap one of my other resources in the industry? Like really listening to people and what they want, because sometimes where they are isn't where they want to be. And just learning about people. I'm a big picture person, and so figuring out what you do and how it fits into the puzzle and how I can help you ends up the law of reciprocity helping yourself in the long run. And when people feel heard and seen and you actually understand that they do this specific thing and not this other specific thing, and you gave them someone that's actually looking for that, it's like an aha moment. And so I think, just really listening to people, taking the time, whether it's one-on-one or in groups, and then just being present. When I was early in my career, I would go to every event. It didn't really matter what the event was, if it was lunch, if it was coffee, if it was whatever, and I would just listen and I would talk to people, and then people started to recognize me and be familiar with me. So whether or not they had a conversation, they were like, wait, I've seen that person before, like, who is she? And so it just led to really great connections and really great responsibility. So I think being present is important. But the self-care aspect is important too. I mean, taking time, for as an extrovert as I am, I will talk to no one over the weekend and just watch Netflix. I don't leave my apartment sometimes because I've just been outpouring too much energy that I need to just kind of recharge. And when I have too much on the weekend and a full week, it's like, don't talk to me. Please just send me an email because I don't want to talk on the phone. So just kind of listening to yourself, I think, is important to find that balance.
And I think one of the things, was anyone in the youth
generational
conversation next door? The intern that spoke over there was so incredibly impressive and repeated some of the words that they're using, which is, make your voice heard, cross into other functions, ask for what you need. And it was very impressive to hear someone so young in their career be able to define what their next step was. And ask for it with a lot of confidence when we think about how easy it is to not do that the way it is. One interesting thing about large organizations that I want to make sure everyone does walk away with is the infrastructure is there to move careers, move functions.
And allow.
So sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I thought it was the camera. It's talking. But the infrastructure is there to be able to widen your scope. Ask for sponsorship or mentorship, get additional educational opportunities, tap into even external coaching that you might not have access to in a small. And if I have one piece of advice, which will be the question for this panel next before we open up a little, is, if there's something I wish I knew earlier in my career, is that really world is your oyster. You can tap into all sorts of resources by asking. Most of the time they exist. I had a unique opportunity working with the board of directors one day, and I was busy. I was a new CEO and working with an emerging company, and the board of directors had a coach. And they asked me, would I be interested in having a coach? And I'm thinking, I'm swamped. I'm super busy. I don't have time for a coach. And I said yes. Because I find yes and to be a very good approach to getting access to different people. It turned out it was the first organizational development hire from Steve Jobs. He was retired, he became a coach, he was my coach for a year. And I thought, wow, what if I would have said, no, I don't have time, what were the chances that I would have met these incredible people? And I think most of my career has spanned that way, where almost an accident of just being there and saying yes, or tapping into the resources that exist, or trying to find out if they exist, has made a difference down the line, and it's kind of a wild thing. If you had one wish of something that you wish you knew earlier in your career that you know now about connection, networking, kind of the power of your community, what advice would you have for the group?
I wish I would have started earlier. As a student, almost every organization that I know of has free membership. And in Milwaukee, being small Milwaukee, I'm originally from Los Angeles, so it's a much different pond. Everyone is almost always willing to help, or is like, oh, you look new, or you look lost, or you look young, like, come talk to me, right? So I think I would have wished I started earlier. And I think I probably wish I would have started listening to my dad a little bit sooner. He's been there, done that, had all the mistakes, and so it's hard as a kid to set aside the fact that it's your parents telling you what to do when you're older. But I think those are probably two things I would have done earlier.
I think starting earlier, I don't think you know until you stumble into something great. I wish I was more earlier too.
I would say trust the process. Something that I'm so enjoying as I get older is the wisdom that comes from lived experience and the joy of being nicer to myself. And so I used to approach networking, I used to approach being with kind of the big kahunas. I needed to show up and impress them and try to prove my value. And I now look back and I think, perhaps that wasn't necessarily a reflection of me, but it was a reflection of maybe not so awesome leadership. Right? Because great leaders, they know that everyone has value, that everyone has gifts. And their job, part of their job, right, is to help you cultivate those, to help you rise. Right? So for me, mindful self-compassion, knowing that you're not in this alone, right, that we're all feeling this way, and given the givens, what would feel like kindness. So I would have been kinder to myself earlier on. And I would also just like to say too, for networking meetings, if any of you are recovered people pleasers or recovering people pleasers, I want to remind you that it is not your job to make sure that everyone is participating, and everyone is having a great time at the event, even if it's your event. And I also want to remind you that you are not responsible for talking to the chatterboxes all night long, right? That what you can say is, I so appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking to me. I'm going to go mingle with some other people now. I hope you have a great night. You can walk away.
Have either of you had a formal coach or mentor in your background? Do you wish you would have had one?
I feel like my dad's that for free. I don't know, I just, as a young professional, budgeting and living in, with a full-time salary for the first time, okay, but I want a nice apartment, and then you want to be a member of this club, and do I want to go to the gym, do I want to go out, do I want to travel? There's just a lot of trade-offs, I think, and maybe prioritizing a professional coach is something I'll do at some point. I feel like I have some very strong mentors in my circle that I can rely on, and I think, one of the things my dad told me early is everything has a trade-off. You have to attribute a dollar value to every part of your business, right? So if you want to make more money, but you have less time, how much do you value that money versus that time? Put a dollar value on it. And that way, when you're evaluating jobs, you can decide, okay, I'm getting paid enough that the trade-off is there, or it's not. And so just kind of being sure in what you want and what you're looking for. I got that reflectiveness from my dad, so I didn't really need it from someone else. But I would consider him like a coach in a lot of ways. So
Yes, and his coach Julie in the room. Give a little wave. Oh, Julie, she said she's going to come to this session. Yes, I have. And I've had two different types of coaches. One more general business and helping me as an entrepreneur just when I was getting my start. And then most recently, I have been working with someone on helping me really define my objective. What do I want to do with the rest of this year, and what is that going to look like? As an entrepreneur, I want to do all the things, right? So it's what I have to decide is what matters most, and that coach really helps keep me accountable and making sure that I don't try to do all the things, but that I focus on what matters most. And then what I also do, because yes, they are an investment, I also set up mastermind groups with different people. And so I started a mastermind group for product-based business owners in Milwaukee. And they are an incredible source of information and coaching and support for me. And then I also set one up on a national level for those who manufacture clean beauty and personal care products.
Power of peer networking, yes, I think. Well, I know we have a limited amount of time, and I wanted to make sure that we have time for questions. We do have a full house, so is anyone bold enough to raise their hand and ask a question about connections, networking, coaching?
So I have a question. As I'm learning about all these organizations and stuff, it's sort of like getting out of hand on how to organize, like how to, like I'm starting to know that this community meeting happens like every month, et cetera, et cetera. But how do you keep all of these organizations organized so that you're checking in on them regularly and making sure you're not missing any really important cool developments?
That's a really great question, and something that I do that a mentor of mine reminded me that instead of going so wide, go deep. And so I wonder if maybe it's evaluating where are you getting the most fulfillment and the value, and where are people pouring into you, maybe concentrating on those groups, and then maybe in time add some more on. But that's kind of where I'm at with my work right now, is going like deep and not all the things.
You'll also find there's probably connections within some of the groups where you'll have your close-in organization that you spend a lot of time with, and you'll find that certain people in that also do this group, or maybe they'll connect you to another group that would be important to sort of the professional development or expertise you're looking for. I find a lot of times they're one step removed, so most likely if you invest in one pretty heavy, you're going to get connected to some of the ones that would be valuable to what you're looking for.
I would say when I first started in my career, I did kind of a shotgun approach where I was like, okay, I'm just going to sign up for everything and see what happens. And then about 2-ish years in, I really started to evaluate, like, I'm the type of person that if I commit to something, I want to be able to fully commit to it. So I'm not just going to be on 10 committees and then go to one meeting a month, even though recently I've been bad at W Crew, I apologize. It's just, you want to be able to have the time. I will say something that I did notice in my networking is women are less likely to refer to women early. So I will meet a man, I will never go to coffee with him, he will know I'm an attorney, and I will get a referral because he got a phone call or a client's mad and he's like, attorney, here you go. Women want to know you, women want to know who you are, if they like you, where you go get coffee, like what you do for business before they refer to you. So I very consciously make an effort to not do that. I will give 3 names, whether I know you very well or not, and I'll give the disclaimer. I don't know them professionally, I only know them personally, but here's a name, see if you click, whatever the case may be. So it took me a little while to realize what I was getting out of all the organizations, because I didn't feel like I was getting a lot out quickly because of that women kind of bias we have against ourselves. Now I'm much more selective. I also rely on my friends to be like, hey, are you going to that tonight? I'm like, what is it? And then they'll tell me, I'm like, sure, I don't have anything going on, I'll go. So that's kind of where I'm at a lot of times, is it depends on my schedule and my work. And I just got back from a trip. I was supposed to go to dinner last night, and I was like, you know what, I need to work because I have this conference today, and then I'm golfing tomorrow. So just kind of figuring out where you're at is fluid. The more you get into things, the more you realize which are more valuable or which events actually matter for those organizations. Like if they have a keynote award thing every year, that's probably where everyone's going to be. But those little coffees, one-offs, a little less important if you can't make it. So.
And I recognize my answer went exactly against what I said in the very beginning. I do everything. In the beginning, I did everything, and and then you figure out your people and where you want to be and where you want to give and where people are giving back to you. So I do think there's strength in both, right? Trying it all to figure out what best serves you and where you can best serve.
And we might have a little bit more time. Any other questions?
Do you recommend, I guess, one way or another, either going to networking events or joining new organizations solo or like with a buddy?
Take a buddy.
Yeah, pros and cons.
I might argue with her on that. I think there's you'll always be more comfortable going with your people, right? That's an easy thing to do. What I will say for things I'm particularly interested in, I like to go alone because I tend to reach out more and talk more to people I don't know. And so I would challenge the social boundaries on that. I think when you first start networking, especially when you're young, it's much easier to go with a group. But I think as you carve out places you really are interested in and you want to learn more about, you almost have to step out of the people you know and interact with people you don't know. And that's easier done when you're solo, I think.
My response is whatever's going to get you there, right? Showing up is what matters most. So
When I was young, I loved having a buddy because if a conversation lulled or like someone walked away from me to go talk to somebody else, I'd be like, okay, where'd you go? And then I would go like join her conversation. So there was a safety blanket there. Also, I'm more likely to go to an event if I know that I know people there. Just naturally, like, oh, I haven't seen so-and-so in a while. He's been busy. He's going tonight. I'm going to make a point to go to see him, and then whoever else I see is convenient. But I think the older you get, or the more interested you are in the topic, you probably can talk a little bit more intelligently about it. When I got older, I tend to stay too long, so sometimes people don't want to go with me because I am the opposite of an Irish goodbye. I'll say I'm meeting, and then an hour later I'll still be there, so I think it's a...
So now you know she'll be the last person that does that. I think there was one more question on this side of after your.
Okay. It's somewhat related, actually. So I am a more shy, introverted person. So one of my biggest fears in life is walking into a room full of people that are talking and know each other, and I don't know anybody. But if I go in a group, I'm just going to talk to my friend the whole night, and what's the point of me going? So do you have any tactical advice for people who might feel the same way to break into a conversation or not just advertise it and be like, I can't do that, I can't do it?
Yes, I have to say, so two of my best friends who I met through work and have incredible professional relationships with are introverts. And introverts, I think, have unique gifts for networking. One, you tend to more empathically listen and participate in a conversation because you're following the thread a little closer. And then I think also you tend to be a little bit, you're processing more and thoughtful probably in the preparation. So what I would say to you is there's probably a few basics in networking, which I think there's a tip sheet floating around from this that we try to synthesize down. One is know your intro, right? You need a short form verbiage for yourself to introduce yourself. It should probably not include your title, but a little bit about yourself. Think 1 to 2 sentences tops. That'll allow you to participate more in conversation. Don't be afraid if you're in a group and the conversation doesn't come around to you. That I can tell you as an extrovert, I'm in networking events all the time where sometimes you're like, this isn't a good group for me, I'm gonna thank everyone, walk away. But I would say know the topic and use your natural skills, which is preparation and empathic listening to participate. You don't have to be an active, very talkative person in the group, but I guarantee, if you participate using those 2 skills that you have naturally, chances are you'll be part of the conversation in no time. And then I would challenge you to go by yourself, without your peer group.
I would say I would typically go with one person, so not like a group of people, because then y'all just might as well go out to dinner. I would go with one person. I would always say keep your head up when you're in a line for drinks or in a line for food, because I've had a lot of conversations start by just like, oh, what kind of cheese is that? And then, when in doubt, compliment. I love your shoes. I love your hair. Oh my God, your purse. Or talk about sports. I made a comment about some Masters
favorite question is, what do you do for fun? And then you can ask follow-up questions based on what they say. And I also remember a great opportunity too is that after soaking in everything that you learned and the people you met, remember the follow-up matters too. So maybe that's where you take opportunity to really shine.